Today, I'm so excited to be here with Jeff Huxford, a brain injury survivor and the author of a book called Finding Normal. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. We met a few months ago. Well, probably a couple of years ago. We met in Nashville, so it's exciting to be back in touch with you, and appreciate all you're doing for brain injury survivors and caregivers and all. I know you do a lot, so it's a big deal.
Thanks, Jeff. And I appreciate all that you do as well. And it was so great to meet you. We met, it was actually, I think, a couple months before the pandemic in
Okay.
2019. Uh,
Wow.
yeah. And it's
Longer
crazy.
ago than I thought. Then, yeah.
Yeah. Well, time kind of warps together with the
Yeah.
shutdown and
For sure.
everything. But
Yeah.
it was so good to meet you. And we hung out in a coffee shop and talked. And you did a Facebook Live with me that day um,
Oh
for
yeah. Yeah.
my yeah for on my Hope After Head Injury Facebook page. We just went live and you shared some of your story and talked about your book, and people came on and were commenting, and it was so much fun. And I've been wanting to have you back on the podcast. It's just been a matter of me getting my scheduling together with all the
Sure.
guests, and so I'm really excited to have you back today.
It worked. Yeah, it's good. I've did several podcasts. I've not done one in a while, so this is good to be back doing these things.
That's great. So, March is Brain Injury Awareness Month. And
Mhm.
so, I just want to ask you first, what does brain injury awareness mean to you? And then we'll go into talking more about your story.
Yeah, sure. I mean, being a physician, you'd think I would be really kind of up to date and aware of all the things that are going on medically. But before my brain injury, I wasn't aware of how common they are, and how so many times I think people have brain injuries and they're not aware of it. They just kind of deal with it and think like this is normal. This is what I deal with, and they don't recognize that the fact that they're dealing with a brain injury. So after I had mine, I think I became more just aware in general of brain injury awareness, and just noticing how common it is. And so I've tried to be proactive with that. Not always uh, as active as I'd like to be with the awareness, but hopefully that I'm able to do some of that.
I think you're doing great. And, I really love what you said about how, even as a physician, before you
Mhm.
had your injury, you didn't really have much awareness. And that's the thing, right? We don't really know it until we live it.
Right.
And that's why I like that you brought that up, because it's so important for us to bring more awareness, because people just don't know. And then brain injury can happen to anyone at any time. And so it would be so wonderful if the world was more aware about brain injury, so that when it does happen,
Mhm.
unfortunately, they might know better what to do and understand also for the survivors living with it that even if you can't see it on the outside, it's still real.
Yeah, I think that because the earlier you recognize it, the better. The get into the different therapies and the rehabilitation. The earlier that starts, the better. I did a project a couple of years ago for Brain Injury Awareness Month, and tried to get pictures sent in of everybody that's had a brain injury and their caregivers. And the it wasn't my phrase, but I found this phrase I put on there. It says brain injury doesn't have a face until it's yours or someone you know. And I think that's been true in my case. Brain injury, once I dealt with mine, it's just I've become aware of how common it is in other people as well.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. Can you share some of your story? How did you have your brain injury? What was your life like before? And how did it change things?
Yeah, so my injury occurred back in 2012, May of 2012, and at the time, I was mid 30s. I'd been married for around almost 10 years at the time. We had two kids. My son was a kindergartner. My daughter was in preschool, and I was working as a family doctor. I've been working uh, at the same practice for about 6 years at the time. Um, the My accident was it was an automobile accident. It was my day off, and I was not too far from my house. I was coming back from I ran in town to get a few things at the hardware store. I was coming back home, and another driver ran through a stop sign and struck me in the passenger side and pushed me into a concrete pole. And uh, I don't remember the accident happening. I don't remember really um, anything that happened after the accident until about 3 weeks later. But they had to get me out of my truck, and they flew me to Chicago in a helicopter, and I was uh, at the first hospital for a week, and then was transferred to a rehab center in downtown Chicago, the Rehab Institute of Chicago. It's got a different name now. Not sure what it's called now, but the same hospital I was, and I was there for 3 weeks, and um, my injury was quite severe, and they weren't sure. They were very unaware or unsure how much I'd recover. So they prepared my wife for um, uh, the likelihood of me going to another rehab facility for prolonged rehab. They weren't sure how long it would be, but about 3 weeks out from the accident, I kind of had this. I woke up and uh, started getting better, and the doctors changed their mind and thought I could go home and do my rehab, the rest of my therapy at home. So I went home after a month and started my outpatient therapy, and slowly got better. And again, when the accident happened, it was a severe brain injury. They thought the chances of me going back to working as a doctor was pretty low, but yeah, God performed a miracle, and I was able to go back to work after 5 months. And yeah, so I started working in the same office I was at. I was never back to the same level. I wasn't seeing the same amount of patients. Um, uh, the knowledge was there, I think, but I was never working as quite as fast as I could before, as efficient. So um, I worked as a doctor for 3 years following that. But then I started having some complications from the brain injury in regards to just being able to focus and pay attention and keep up with my schedule, and with fatigue and headaches, a lot of different things. And my doctor thought although I wasn't making any mistakes at the time, I was still practicing good medicine. He thought the more I worked, the chances of me having making a medical error would be greater. So I was forced to retire at 3 weeks. I'm sorry, at 3 years following going back. So that was in 2016. I had to retire from medicine.
And what was that like? I mean, was that emotional? How did it
Well,
feel?
it was. I try to explain. It was almost. I had to adjust to when I had the brain injury initially. I had to adjust to this new person I was, and how I had all these new things I had to deal with, and new strength. I mean, some new strengths and new weaknesses that I wasn't. That I didn't have to worry about before. So I had to adjust to those. And I got back to work as a doctor, and started finding some normalcy there. So then when I couldn't work anymore, I found that out, it was like trying to like a whole new normal to deal with. There was the normal as me as the brain injured doctor. Now there's the normal, this brain injured person who can't be a doctor anymore. So now it was another adjustment, I guess. Yeah.
And your book is called Finding Normal. So you
Mm-hmm.
just mentioned, there's different there were a couple different stages you went
Sure.
through after your injury. And so
Mm-hmm.
what does that phrase finding normal mean to you?
Yeah. So the title of this came because that's something I heard from the doctors from the start. They talked about you've had this brain injury, and the normal that you had before is kind of a thing of the past. You got to figure out what this new normal is. And I kind of was in denial of that at first. I thought that maybe they were exaggerating how bad my injuries were, and that I would have no problem getting back to who I was before. And so my goal initially was just to kind of prove them wrong and get back to who I was before. So eventually I realized that wasn't going to happen. So I guess finding normal to me meant finding, okay, the normal I had before was a thing of the past. I got to figure out what my new normal is. And I think I've told people before that um, in regards to the word normal, I think that was always such a goal of mine growing up, that I wanted to stay normal. I didn't want to stand out, and that I kind of thought the goal of life was to be as normal as possible. But I think since I've had this accident and heard this word normal so much, I've realized that that actually shouldn't be the goal. We're all made to stand out in our own ways. So whatever our normal is, it's okay to embrace that and utilize that and serve it. Use our normal in whatever way God wants us to use that normal.
I love that. Because, yeah, it is hard. And it's the word, it could mean so many different things to different people. And so after a brain injury, your whole world just changes and shifted. Through your darkest night, hope survives.